How you doing, people? Welcome to the Rubin Report. I'm Dave Rubin. I've got Beth Troutman, Jimmy Dore with me. Let's jump into nukes, because President Obama yesterday said that his biggest worry isn't Russia. It's actually that a nuclear bomb might go off in New York City. I moved from New York about a year ago, so I'm feeling pretty good about this. But not only that, but just a couple days ago in the Netherlands, a group of world leaders got together to play some nuclear war games to sort of figure out the planning and preparation and fallout, no pun intended, if a nuclear bomb was to go off in a major metropolitan area. So each world leader had a computer tablet with touchscreen options to make one of 4 responses to a series of 4 scenario films played out by actors. So they literally were watching actors act out this situation. In the war game, a terrorist attack with an atomic dirty bomb takes place in the financial heart of an unnamed but Western metropolis. This is probably New York if it's in the case of the United States. And in a competitive environment with a ticking clock, the world leaders had to make rapid choices before the results were presented to the group, followed by discussion. So I think this is really fascinating. So they basically were sort of playing like a real-time, half video game, half acted out, real people response thing to something pretty horrific. Yeah. So I'll start with just the base level thing. Is this inevitable? Is a nuke going off in one of our cities anywhere, not just the United States? Is it just ultimately inevitable that this will happen?
Well, let's hope not. I mean, I hope the idea is that diplomacy, communication, things like that can prevent a nuclear weapon, a nuclear bomb from going off in one of our cities. The thing that I found really fascinating about this was Chancellor Merkel thinking that this was such a strange thing for these leaders to be doing. And I found that as a woman hilarious, because women, we sit around watching guys play video games thinking, what? This has no real world application. This isn't going to help you achieve or do anything. And you've got Chancellor Merkel in this situation with these men playing on their tablets in this kind of war game scenario, thinking this isn't what we really need to be focusing our time, energy, and attention on. Is a war game, video game, going to prevent this from going off? I would say no. I don't think that this is necessarily going to be the way that we're going to prevent it from happening. But right. I would like to think that it's not inevitable, and that's a very rose-colored glasses way of looking at things. But I don't want to live in that kind of fear. Yeah,
well, you can't live in that kind of fear. That's a pretty great visual. I picture now Angela Merkel as the mother and all the rest of the guys downstairs playing video games. Get outside, you crazy kids. What do you think? Is it inevitable that this kind of thing, I mean, with the way dirty bombs and that now it can be done in a suitcase and all that, is it inevitable, no matter how much they prepare, that one day this kind of thing is going to happen?
So when I first heard Brock say that, I thought, I can't believe that it hasn't happened already. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I realized that, well, remember they tried to have a couple of terrorists in an SUV in Manhattan, right? And they couldn't even get the freaking SUV bomb to blow up, right? So this guy's basically got a firecracker in his car, and he can't get it to work. So, and then there was the guy with the bomb on the plane. He couldn't get it to work. And so I'm like, I think even if they do get a dirty bomb, they probably won't get it to work.
They won't get it. We have lucked out a couple times, right? With the shoe guy and the underwear guy, things that don't really work out. What do you make of Obama saying this, though, the way he did?
That was shocking the way he said it.
It seemed bizarre because he is so measured and controlled. So it's one thing if he truly isn't that concerned about Russia. I think that's okay, and we have to let diplomacy work. But the idea of that, he just suddenly out of nowhere said, well, you know, our most important city, it might be destroyed by it seems sort of out of character for him, doesn't it?
It seemed like a strange political move. I mean, in my mind, it was him trying to take the focus off of Russia, off of Putin, off of what's going on, and off of the criticism that he's getting for his foreign relations, his foreign policy.
So you think he was just like, oh, let me say the craziest thing possible that'll scare the shit out of everybody?
That was one of the things that was my first instinct reaction whenever I heard him say that, because suddenly, if you hear the president say that, then your fear goes in a different direction.
Yeah.
I thought about, like, well, what are the people in New York thinking when they hear that? Right. You know, can you imagine if you're a kid in school and the president on TV says, we're worried about someone blowing up New York with a bomb. What the F? Are you kidding me? Should I be scared all the time? The president's saying it on TV. I thought that was irresponsible of him to say it like that. It would scare the shit out of people living in there. And I also think it's funny, whenever they call it a dirty bomb, it makes me laugh a little because, you know, my parents always castigated me for swearing in my comedy so much. Why you gotta be so dirty? It sounds like the bomb is just coming all the way. It's going shit,
That's what everybody else would be saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Such a dirty bomb.
Look, obviously we're not privy to all the stuff that's going
Sure.
on with these games or what's really going on with who has nukes and all that kind of stuff and scientists that defect from countries and all that. But do you think these games actually do anything? Because they've been doing these for years. This isn't the first time they've done this kind of thing. But it makes me think if a nuke was to go off somewhere, let's get out of America for a second. Let's say it went off in Paris. How about that? Do you think the games would actually matter? Jimmy's going frickin' French. Freedom Prize. You're still on that Freedom Prize thing. Do you think the games would mean anything? Because I feel like there would be such chaos and such a cascading effect of lunacy that none of the things that they're doing would really matter.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yes, you try to plan for a nuclear war, huh? Hey, let's try to plan for when your head blows up. Okay, what should I do after my head blows up? Well, first you put a bandage around it. It's like, no, so I think it's all, once a nuclear bomb goes off, that's it, game's over, right? Don't you think?
Yeah. I do, yes. It seems, I guess they have to
They flew
do
a
their
plane.
due diligence, but yeah.
They hijacked a plane and flew it into buildings in New York, and we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. What do you think if someone blows off who else? We're going to strike somebody with a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
I mean, one goes off, it really seems like a domino to me.
Yeah. Well, that is a good point, because if one went off here, we would nuke somebody.
Somebody's
within a
getting
week,
nuked.
we would nuke somebody. Even with Obama, who obviously isn't as militant, let's say, although he's done some strange things with drones, which we'll get to later, as Bush. So is this just really like every science fiction movie I've ever seen, where humans are just going to destroy the Earth and we're going to have to go live on Elysium or on Mars or something?
Right.
Is that really where we're all going with this?
I think a lot of people would say yes. I think a lot of people would say that humans have been destroying the Earth since humans became humans. This is just a quicker way
Whoa,
of
you
going
believe in
about
evolution?
it.
The way you just implied
Hey.
that. Ooh, edgy stuff today,
It
Jimmy.
is very edgy.
What do you think? Is this humans, are we going to just do it to ourselves between greenhouse gases and global climate change and everything else and nukes?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't buy property in Florida. Yeah, I'm not, I don't think we're going to make it past 2050. I don't think we have to worry about Social Security running out of money. I think we're all going to be dead before that
Well,
happens.
they say Miami is going to be underwater in like 30 years.
People don't yes, that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't buy property in Florida. And, the whole thing people forget, like Syria, what's happening and what's destabilizing that whole region is a drought. That all started because of a drought, and people came into the cities protesting, and then the police overreacted, and it started this whole thing. So, they talk about climate change having geopolitical impact. It's happening right now.
Right.
It
If we're
absolutely
going to worry
is.
about something, that's what we should really be
Yes.
worrying about and focusing on, because that's a much larger problem and something that's really happening. I mean, we shouldn't be necessarily thinking about playing a game and wondering what would happen if a nuclear bomb went off. We actually have something that's like a nuclear bomb that's going off consistently, that's causing huge problems. It just takes a longer period of time.
Yes.
You think we have some progressive around here? We started with nuclear war. We brought it around to climate change. So there you go. All right, let's talk politics. I thought this was pretty interesting. Nate Silver, who everybody loves this guy, right? He predicted the last election. He's a big numbers guy who now is part of ESPN. He's doing sports. He got out of the political world, basically, and he's doing sports. But he did have some interesting thoughts on 2014. Basically that the Republicans are going to win back the Senate, which is a scary, scary thought. We've got a bunch of quotes, actually. We think the Republicans are now slight favorites to win at least 6 seats and capture the chamber. The Democrats' position has deteriorated somewhat since last summer, with President Obama's approval ratings down to 42 or 43%, which is down from about 45%. And as compared with 2010 or 2012, the GOP has done a better job of recruiting credible candidates, with some exceptions. Okay, so Silver does urge some caution there. These aren't, mind-blowing numbers that Republicans are automatically going to win, but it is sort of interesting. And what I sort of glean into this is that this is an Obamacare thing, that the Republicans have sort of won the messaging somehow on that we can't have socialized medicine and not everyone has a right to healthcare and all that. Do you think that's what this is about, that they've somehow scared enough people to think they have to be voting for them?
Oh, definitely. I think the people are, oh my God, my healthcare changed. It might get canceled. People don't know what's going on, what's happening. People don't even know what's in their healthcare plan until they get sick. So everybody's running scared, everybody's running afraid. But Nate Silver, I think the Democrats way overreacted to this, right? Because he's not saying that's going to happen. He said there's a slight chance that might happen.
But that's how much stock people put in what he said.
Because of what happened last time with Romney. But
Yeah.
don't forget that Nate Silver was wrong in 2012. No, 2010, I think, when he predicted that the Democrats would lose again the Senate, and they ended up gaining seats.
Yeah.
So he's not always correct.
Yeah. So, well, that is a good point. Nobody's always correct. And of course, these number guys, that's why he's working for ESPN now. It's a lot easier dealing with sports numbers than political numbers. But what I was thinking about this was that the Republicans, as far as I can tell, have no particular message other than everything's against Obama. So is anyone fired up for the Republicans? That's what I think is interesting here. People are saying we're going to vote for the Republicans in 2014. But is anyone actually voting for them, or are they just voting against Obama?
I think this happens a lot with midterm elections. People do tend to vote against what the current status quo is. And the Republicans do have a strong message in attaching their horse and carriage to the Affordable Care Act. They do have a lot of messaging that they can use. And Nate wasn't wrong in predicting, and he was actually, I think, maybe dead on in predicting that 2014 we might see Republicans take over the Senate. The good thing that this does for the Democrats, though, and you'll already see this happening, they can take this messaging and they can use it to raise funds and fund these campaigns. But we do have about 10 Senate races that are really important for the Republicans, really important for the Democrats. We have Democrats who are stepping down. South Dakota is an example. You've got Senator Johnson, who is retiring, and you've got a really popular former governor running in that state. Mike Rounds could take over that seat. That gives you a Republican. North Carolina is going to be an interesting race. Kay Hagan won that Senate seat from Elizabeth Dole back in 2008 when North Carolina was a blue state for the first time in my lifetime. Yeah. And it went back to red in 2012. So Kay Hagan is going to have a tough race. Looks like Tom Tillis is going to be maybe one of the best possible candidates, Speaker of the House there in North Carolina. Yep. There are some people who are it's a risk for some of the Democrats, but that's what happens in midterm elections. We've seen it. History repeats itself. We've seen it over and over again. And I think Nate was actually making kind of a safe prediction in suggesting that it might happen.
Interesting. So do you think this is sort of shows the strength of our democracy in a weird way, that in the midterms we do often vote against the incumbent president because it is a little bit of check of powers, which we seem to have completely lost?
In normal times, I would say yes. But I would say that the Republican Party has gone so far off the rails that now the Democrats are Republicans. And so we're not actually getting so as far as a government that's representative of the people's will, we certainly don't have that right now at all. I don't think. I mean, look, 90% of the people wanted gun restrictions and gun legislation. It didn't happen. What does that mean? That means that our government, we're like it's a banana republic, It's like, who are they're only serving their donors. They're not serving us.
Which means that what we really need is a different kind of campaign financing. I come back to this all the time when it comes to politics.
Yeah, so campaign finance, which we talk, everything we do here at the Young Turks is about money in politics and who's bought and sold. Why do we not even have any discussion about campaign finance anymore? We used to have that McCain-Feingold thing. What happened? That thing disappeared, and now it literally is not in the news anywhere.
Because the people who are supposed to be talking about it is the media, right? The fourth estate, right? And they're not talking about it because the people who pay their salary and sign their checks want to have influence in politics. They now work for these major corporations. For instance, right, so Brian Williams and David Gregory, they work for General Electric, a major defense contractor. They, of course, want to have influence on the government, so they're not going to go on their news show and say, hey, we got to get, what we're doing is horrible. We have to get rid of it. And by the way, the Iraq war is bullshit, and we profited off of it. So they're not going to do any of that, and that's the problem. The criminals bought the news media after they bought the Congress. So now there's no watchdog anymore, and that's why the only people talking about it is us.
Yeah, well, okay, so then speaking of us, is the online news thing, now we're slightly off of where we started here, but is the online news thing, just to wrap this all up, are we the only estate that's left that can stop this thing?
I hope so, because if you really look at the way the world is working, especially this younger generation, that's where we're getting our news. We're looking to the people online to inform us and talk to us. And if we as an online community end up getting more attention, then ultimately, don't they have to follow suit? Doesn't mainstream media have to follow suit? It's terrifying to think about now because of when the Supreme Court overturned campaign financing and we created all these super PACs. It was basically like money laundering for campaign finance, and it's difficult to discuss it now because you have to dig in a different way, dig really deeply to find out who is financing what and how and whom.
Well said, and I can promise you guys that we're not bought and sold. And don't trust the Democrats, don't trust the Republicans, trust yourself. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about immigration. We actually have not done much about immigration on this show, and I saw a Rasmussen survey that was really interesting about what Americans think about immigration right now, so let's look at some numbers. 78% of likely U.S. voters believe everyone should be required to prove his or her citizenship before being allowed to register to vote. 29% believe laws that require proof of citizenship before allowing voter registration discriminates against such voters. And 61% say laws do not discriminate, up 3 points from this time last year. Okay, so as I said, we have not done a tremendous amount on immigration, so I'm glad that we're talking about this. And this is one of these things that it's always an issue, and we sometimes talk about it a little bit more, and then suddenly we forget about it, and it's hard to figure out which party's for what. The 78%, let's just talk about that.
Yeah.
That seems pretty legit to me, that basically 80% of the country is saying you should at least be able to prove your citizenship to vote. Does that seem like a sort of baseline way to start?
Well, I think it seems like we've been discussing it so much in the media in a fear-based way, but when you really look at the numbers for things like voter fraud, they're so incredibly minuscule. It really isn't a huge problem, but we've kind of now made it this whole immigration issue in a fear-based issue more than an actual election issue. But the reality of the matter is it does, requiring this kind of voter ID, it does and will continue to discriminate against women, against people who are in lower income brackets, against the elderly. And the majority of this is all political because the people that it affects do tend to vote Democrat. So if you look at this, it's happening in red states. It's happening in red states.
So, all right, before I let you jump in, Jimmy, what's the rationale? Because this is what people say all the time about why is it that having IDs would discriminate against women and minorities?
Well, one of the reasons is because it costs money to end up getting those IDs. Whether it's a birth certificate that you have to use, if you have to have a copy of a birth certificate, that costs money, $15, $20. It costs money to get a driver's license. It costs money to get a passport. And it also requires transportation to certain offices in order to get some of these documents. And that can be discriminatory against people who don't have the funds to do that. I understand the idea of being registered to vote. I understand the idea of making sure that voter fraud isn't a problem. But really, if you look at it, it hasn't been a huge problem.
So, okay, so I get all that for sure, but I basically agree with the people that say you should at least have to prove that you're legally in this country to vote. Am I a crazy conservative on this issue?
Always.
Well, I mean, you have to prove your ID that you're 21 to buy beer. So I don't think saying that just proving that you live in this country
buying beer
is too much.
Is not a guaranteed right in the Constitution, right? So that's really the difference there. But I think that once I was informed about the ramifications of a voter ID law, I was against the voter ID law because they know they can scientifically prove that it's going to eliminate a certain percentage of people from voting for all the reasons she just said, right? Because they're poor and they don't have access, right? And people are like, well, I got an ID. Well, some people don't. There's a 90-year-old woman who's been voting her whole life, and she doesn't have transportation, and she doesn't have money, and she lives on a fixed income, and she doesn't have access to get to that stuff, but she can vote. And they'll say, but no, you can't vote now because you can't do these certain things that we're going to change. So there is, again, this is a solution in search of a problem. There is no voter fraud. Nobody's going and voting twice. It's not happening. So the only reason you would want to implement this is to make sure you tilt the favor in favor of the Republicans and you discriminate against some of the Democrat votes. That's the only reason you would do this.
And to that point, it does seem that the Republicans are the ones that want this all to happen, all these voter ID things. So they're not doing it out of the goodness of the country. They're doing it out of the goodness of
They're on tape saying it.
Right, you're thinking Kansas, Arizona, North Carolina.
Yes, it's just like the guy from Pennsylvania. We've seen that clip a bunch of times where the guy said, a voter ID, which is going to guarantee the state of Pennsylvania for Mitt Romney, done. You've seen that clip. Yeah. That's why they do it. And again, the news media pretending that it's a legitimate argument or not, or what they're doing isn't voter suppression. Why isn't every reporter screaming from the top of their lungs about voter suppression in America? And it's because they're bought and paid for, and they don't want to piss off half the people who want to suppress the vote.
Right. So what would you guys say to Bill O'Reilly, who's on TV every night saying that if if you let these immigrants that are already in the country, the people that are here illegally but they are acting as U.S. citizens, if you let them in, they will all vote Democratic and it will be the end of the Republican Party, which may in a weird way be bad for our political system if we really only became a one political thing, even though we're pretty much a one political thing as is. But what would you say to that argument?
I would say that's just fear mongering. That's just trying to scare people into believing that there's a problem that really just isn't a problem. You know, they're making the discussion about something that isn't a huge issue. There are so many other things that we should be focusing on and talking about, and this is a way to try to maintain control in these very red states.
Yeah, and also 95% of the people that are here, even if they're here illegally, are perfectly legal people within our borders. You know what I mean? They're working jobs and have families. I know people personally who've had families split up and people have been deported that can't see their children for 20 years. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff.
When Bill O'Reilly says, well, we can't let all these immigrants come here because they're going to vote Democrat and it's the end of the Republican Party. Well, what that really means is, hey, there's a bunch of people who we're going to have to appeal to with our policies now that we don't want to have to appeal to with our policies, so we can just keep them away from voting, so we can just keep on appealing to a narrower and narrower base of people. Yep. That's exactly what they're saying. Oh my God, we're going to have to address the reality that what we want in America isn't what most people want in America? Holy shit, yes. Then you should have to change your party's platform or you go away.
Right, and the thing is, in America, we're all children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren of immigrants. Give us you're tired, you're poor, you're hard to mess, and somehow we don't want that anymore.
It's a melting pot.
So final thought on this, because obviously we talk about immigration forever,
Yes.
but what do you think about securing the border? Because that does seem like a legitimate argument to me, at least, that first somehow we should be able to secure the border, and then, you know, to stop new immigrants from coming in illegally while we deal with the issue. Not that we ever do anything in a correct order, but at least that argument at least makes some sense to me.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's definitely an important issue to think about. We have all of the legislation really in place to deal with illegal immigration. We just don't have a lot of real enforcement. We are backwards. We do things kind of in the wrong way. We do approach things in a cart before the horse kind of way when it comes to, and immigration is one of them, when it comes to things like immigration.
Right, because for the last 5 years we could have been dealing with border issues. Just deal with figuring out how do we secure the border, and then say, okay, we've dealt with that. Now we can deal with the people who are here and the people who want to get in. But we never deal with anything in the correct order, do we?
Well, no, of course not. Well, it's because there's this crazy, dual interests, right? So corporations, big farming corporations, big ag business, they want cheap labor, but then they don't want them to be able to vote, so they can vote into a union, right? So it's that push. They want them here to work, but they don't want to treat them like human beings.
Right. That's my point with the legislation. Like, there are people who are here, and people are willingly paying them under the table and paying them tax-free, and those laws aren't being enforced because there are so many big corporations who are benefiting from that kind of thing. So that it's already there. We've established what's illegal, but we aren't necessarily enforcing it because there's a benefit.
And isn't that you're right, Jimmy, about the irony of the Republicans, because especially the Mexicans that come in, they work at jobs that Americans don't seem to want to work, and they bust their asses for 18 hours a day doing the hardest labor-intensive jobs, and then they don't get much for a return, and that's good for the corporations, and really, we know.
It's the lazy Mexicans coming in here taking our jobs.
Taking our jobs. They want this gig, but I'm keeping it, people. Okay. All right, I really love this story. So the government has basically been actively trying to destroy 3 great companies, and yeah, it comes down to money. Tesla, Uber, and Airbnb. So they're all doing interesting, innovative, new business models that are changing the way people communicate and commerce. So let's look at some info about the 3 of them, and then I'll explain further. So if you don't know about Tesla, they built an electric car that people actually want to buy. There's a lot of them here in LA. They boldly sell directly to their wealthy customers rather than subjecting them to auto dealerships, which helps keep the costs down. It gets rid of the middleman. And because auto dealers account for as much as 20% of the state sales tax, legislators work against them. That was happening in New Jersey. Here we go, New Jersey legislator added more burdens to rules already banning direct sales of cars to customers. Now Teslas effectively can't be sold in New Jersey. So this is an electric car that we talk about all the time, and what are we doing? We're regulating it into oblivion. Let's look at the next one. Uber. which we have here and I used last night. It's an app-driven car service that connects drivers and riders in minutes. It presents a threat to traditional taxis and ride services, obviously. Rather than fight for customers by cutting fares or increasing the number of cabs, taxi commissioners and city councils are instead trying to regulate Uber out of business on the grounds that it provides unfair and unsafe competition. Yeah, because the taxi guys had a monopoly, and now they're not happy that because of our apps, we can figure out a way to do this cheaper and more pleasantly, actually. And then finally, Airbnb, which is a website that allows people to rent out apartments and homes, therefore despised by conventional hotels in cities who rely on travelers and tourist taxes. Austin charges hosts an annual licensing fee and limits the number of participants. Portland has banned it in residential neighborhoods. Rent-controlled advocates in New York City are teaming up with the hospitality industry to try to shut it down. Okay, so basically what you have here are sort of three crowd-sourced and in a way crowd-funded businesses that are making better products that people want. And what's happening? Of course, the government is jumping in and trying to tax them away. The Airbnb one is the easiest example, I think, because the hotel lobby is powerful and they don't want people being able to rent their rooms easily. You own your room, I'm pretty sure. Even if you're renting, you're allowed to rent your room out usually. What do we do in a situation like this? Because these are do you guys use these three, any combination of these three things?
Yeah, I've used Uber, used Airbnb. Uber is actually really it's a great app and an easy way to get from point A to point B. And one of the things, especially if you're a woman, is you can read these reviews of drivers and you feel a little bit safer. And another great thing is that drivers can then review passengers too.
Yeah, it
so
goes
that
both
another
ways, yeah.
driver knows not to pick up so and so because he was a rowdy passenger, she was a rowdy passenger. This isn't, I mean, government has done this throughout history, and this is such a complex issue. I mean, thinking about Tesla, this isn't the first time that we've tried to kill an electric car. You know,
Right.
This is happening again, and this is all going to tie into the things that we've been talking about. Think about media being owned by these major corporations. Think about Tesla. You had a couple of Teslas that caught on fire for different reasons, and it became this huge news story that they're suddenly unsafe, and the number of Teslas that actually caught on fire minuscule compared to other cars. And all of this kind of stuff is interconnected. All of this kind of stuff is all about taxpayer dollars. It's all about lobbyists. It's all about the money that's going in to fund these campaigns. It's all of this stuff that we have actually been talking about, and it is complicated. It's not just about these apps. This stretches pretty far.
Yeah, so Jimmy, I hate to beat our money in politics thing again, but this is like a very personal example, I think. It's different than the political example of our politicians being bought off for some foreign policy interest or something like that. This one, Uber should be allowed to exist, should it not?
Well, I was always taught that the definition of fascism is when the government and corporations collude to screw the workers, right? That's pretty much right. So that's what's happening
So we're
here.
pretty close, yeah.
So that's what this is, right? So we've come up with something that helps the consumer, and the government steps in and says, "Nah, it hurts the business. So we're going to protect the business and not the citizen," which is the same thing that happened when senior citizens were going to Canada to get cheaper prescription drugs, because Canada does a very same thing and negotiates the prescription drugs prices with the pharmaceutical companies, which the United States does not do. So they would go there to get them cheaper. The government then stepped in because the pharmaceuticals said, "Hey, we're losing money from these people buying it cheaper in Canada." So the government did do that, and that is the definition of fascism.
And by the way, we should note that it's not that they're colluding just with business, it's a certain type of business, because these are businesses that pay taxes, but they're not the ones that are on the in with the politicians.
Right, because
so
they're
it's
not
actually,
established.
it's more nefarious even than just saying it's
Yes.
fascism, because it's not just about business, because these are businesses too. The government could be in business with them, but they're in business with their old guys, and that's even more perverse in a way.
Right.
You know what I mean? We've sort of evolved and have these three great things, an electric freaking car
Right.
that we've all been waiting for, and the government is still figuring out a way to how do we quash this thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, and think about it. It's happened throughout history. Politics doesn't stay in touch with exactly what the people are moving forward with, and this is another prime example of it. And hopefully now, because we are interconnected and we're using apps, that we all will as citizens, and I'm going to try to be positive here because I don't want
Give
to.
us something. Come on.
I don't want to be depressed throughout my entire life, my entire day. But hopefully we can And what we should do is speak out as voters and speak out as consumers. I mean, Adam Smith said it. It's the free hand, the free market. If we all are moving in that direction, don't cab drivers, don't hotels, don't other people have to step up their game? Shouldn't they have to step up their game? And I would love to think, so that I can sleep at night and wake up and not want to cry and stay in bed, I would like to think that we do and that we can try to have some level of control over it as consumers, because these businesses are going to continue making money, and government and politics, as is usual, they have to catch up, and they are always 20 years behind.
Yeah, so to that point, is the saving grace of this, do we need freaking Facebook to come in and buy Uber? Because Facebook could potentially fight the government a little bit. You know what I mean? They'd have the money and the lawyers maybe. Like, is somehow these giant corporations, are they going to be the ones that have to buy the cool things to push out the middle guy?
Well, I mean, that certainly sounds like one solution, but that sounds like a horrible solution.
Horrible. I felt gross. As I was saying.
It's just like we need a benevolent corporation to fight against a nefarious government. That doesn't seem right? And by the way, Facebook not so benevolent.
Not that benevolent.
Right? So they all seem to be, their hands are all dirty. And I mean, we need another Teddy Roosevelt. We need a guy to come in and bust up the trust and get the government back to the people.
Perfect ending for that one, I think. All right. Let's talk about drones. You know what? Everyone, when you picture drones and you see these things on the news all the time, it's always a drone somewhere in the Middle East, usually, of course, in Yemen or something, firing and usually killing innocent people and double tapping and all that stuff that we talk about all the time here. But we are getting drones here, and they're going to be delivering our packages, and they're also going to be stealing your Wi-Fi and figuring out what's on your phone. Let's take a look at some video of a new drone that's coming out.
That's a hacker. He's using technology installed on a drone to grab cell phone information from people below. This technology has been used on cell phones and laptops. One day, it could be installed in a larger aircraft. Think helicopters or small planes.
Down the road, and seeing lots of devices. It must be the people walking down the road.
He can also see your usernames, passwords, credit card information, and get this, in some cases, your home address.
Yeah, so that's why we talk about drones all the time, because we're doing it over there, but to loosely quote George Bush, it's going to end up coming over here. I mean, look, even if they're not going to be shooting us, which Rand Paul has talked about, you're going to walk out of 7-Eleven, they're going to drone strike you. So even if it's not that level, this is pretty scary stuff, because we know that they're taking our information already and the metadata and all that.
Right.
But now that we're going to have drones flying around, they're going to have access to all this stuff.
Well, it's the same thing that's been happening. I mean, people have been creating these fake Wi-Fi hotspots and stealing people's information. The difference now is that it's mobile, and these little quadcopters that are being used in photography and used in videography, they're inexpensive and it's easy. It's now mobile, and that makes it more terrifying. But this technology has existed. It's one of the prices, sadly, that we have to pay for the convenience of using our phones to bank, using our phones for email, using laptops and things like that. It becomes our responsibility to be aware that these things do happen, and we have to be really careful with how we approach Wi-Fi with our cell phone devices. It's existed. This has happened before. It's just now, like I said, it moves around, and it can get more information more quickly. But if you think about it, I mean, I work in a business that's all about online videos. I mean, that's what I talk about all day long, and I find the people behind them. It's not hard, actually, to find all of this information. I can do it in 10 minutes just with Google searches and looking through Facebook and looking through the things that people post and Twitter feeds and Instagram feeds.
But think about the 9 minutes you'll be able to save when you have your own team of drones. That's the thing. Jimmy, who do you fear more? Do you fear just the hacker, the guy that's going to do this, or do you fear the government doing this? Which do you think is actually worse for us?
I mean, of course, I worry about both of them, but I guess I'm more worried about the government. That seems because they would be shielded from prosecution, things like that. They could, I would be more. I mean, this is, I don't, they say privacy. I don't know. I mean, what are we supposed to do? I just assume that they know everything about me at all time. It doesn't matter what browser I use to surf the web or whatever. They're going to get it if they want it. And it just seems like somehow we're through the looking glass, right? It just seems over now, and your idea of privacy is done.
Right,
Yeah.
we want this life of being connected. We like the way the world has, or a lot of people do. They like that everybody's connected, but that's the other side of it. That's the price we pay of it, because we're living our lives online. All of that is accessible, and not just by drones. Like, that's the thing. People are really scared because the name drone has this, it instills fear in people's hearts. But it's already happening. It has been happening.
You know, every time, I was never a waiter or in a restaurant, but I always thought about, like, when you use a credit card to pay, and they used to do the click thing, and they would have all your information right there. Any person who's a waiter or waitress had your credit card information on them, and yet we never worried about that. Like, they could have stolen it and used it anytime they wanted.
Wait, so is that a little bit of something decent about this? That maybe our information has been out there all along, and
I'm saying, because I know a friend who wouldn't buy a plane ticket using the internet because he was afraid to put his credit card into the internet. I'm like, so when you call them up, it just goes into their computer.
Right.
You're actually telling it to someone.
Yeah, you're going to say. So, I mean, I guess I guess you just cross your fingers and just be glad that nothing has happened so far.
As technology increases, we just have to be more aware. We just have to continue to stay aware of how to protect ourselves. And then businesses also have to step up to the plate and protect with their, and credit card companies do that now. They say that you're not responsible for fraudulent charges. The problem, though, is that we as consumers end up paying the price for that because the bottom line is affected by how much money they lose to fraud all the time. We have to be informed consumers. We have to protect our own information, but we also have to be aware and keep ourselves safe, because more of our information is accessible than we think, and we're the ones putting it out there.
Are you saying you don't read the 50-page thing when you sign up for iTunes? You don't have your team of lawyers with you sitting there going through, well, Beth, I don't know if you want to sign this because
because this is terrible. No one has the time to do that, because we connect everything we live our lives online.
Yeah. Final point on this. I think the through the looking glass, I think, is the perfect way for this. Are we in a really interesting time right now where for a while we had all this stuff? Let's say for the first 10 years of mobile phones and the internet, we all had it. We all loved it. Everyone found porn. Everyone was excited. Now we're in the through the looking glass part, which I don't know how long it's going to last. I feel like we're in like a 3-year thing here of everyone going, shit, we had all this stuff. We love it, but we also hate it. And now what's the other side? You know what I mean? Am I giving you something? I'm giving you a little esoteric, philosophical something there.
I think that it's actually going to continue to increase. There's a great book that came out called The Circle. It's David Eggers, and it's this book that's written about the concept of total transparency. Total transparency. The idea is that the company that he created in this book represents a company kind of like Google. And as people, you're always going to have the people who say, I don't want any more technology, I don't want any more to happen. But the way that the world moves, you end up almost being forced into it. In the book, total transparency means all people in government constantly having cameras on them, all people everywhere constantly having cameras and broadcasting that to everyone. And the weird thing about it is that as you read something like that, you can see that something like that could easily happen, because as we move forward with all of this technology, we get more accustomed to it. We get used to it. It doesn't feel as scary. It doesn't feel as intimidating, and we keep moving forward with it. Will we stop? Will it stop? I didn't think we needed more technology in like 1992, and then suddenly here we have this world. We have a phone that has more technology in it than the Apollo that went to the moon. So, we don't stop it. We keep buying into it. We keep moving with it because we have this whole concept that it's better to be connected. It's better to put our lives out there. Yeah. Because we kind of become narcissistic in a way.
You can't stop progress. Bring us home, Jimmy.
Well, you know what they say, the definition of a narcissist is someone who's better looking than you.
Perfect. All right, well, this leads us to a perfect segue for our final segment here, because there are a bunch of apps that are popping up that are purely to give us online anonymity, if that actually exists. We've got a list of a couple of them. There's Confide, which erases your text messages right after they're read. There's Whisper, which shares secrets anonymously. And there's Yik Yak, anonymous social chat room. So this is perfect considering the topic we were just talking about. So going to your point of the circle, which if you guys are watching, if you haven't seen the clip right before this, we'll annotate so you can get right back over there, about everyone being completely transparent with everything, is the anonymity thing the next thing before that? You know what I mean? First we put all the stuff out there, which we're all doing now. Next it'll be we'll all do it anonymously, and there's plenty of people doing that already. And then after that we get to the place of total everything out there.
It doesn't surprise me that this is a trend right now, but didn't we start with the internet kind of having this? Isn't that how people started in these chat rooms, that it was anonymous and people were talking to each other under, some fake screen name? And now because of things like Facebook and Instagram and you have a profile picture, it became a little more public. It's strange to me because we've become this culture of sharing, and we have become narcissistic in a way. Like we want everyone to know our ideas and our thoughts. Yep. It's strange.
You guys want to take a selfie quick? We should
right,
do it right
take a selfie
now.
really quick, and then post it so that everybody knows where we are and what's going on. Exactly. But it's strange to me that people feel the need to share their deepest, darkest secrets with their friends without their friends knowing exactly who they are. I mean, what happens to conversations? And the argument is, well, if somebody is having an issue with substance abuse or if someone is having a real personal problem, what happens to actual personal contact where you confide in somebody and say, I need your help? Yeah. And instead of putting it out there for all of your friends to judge and then sit and discuss, I know that it's anonymous, but your friends, they're going to get together and say, do you think that was Bobby? Do you think that I think that he would be the person who said that? This is like gossip on a weird new level. I don't think it will, I hope it doesn't last, because it seems like it's opening a door to more negativity than positivity.
So, but could there be something cathartic about this online anonymity thing? I mean, if you had an app, if you were just having a crazy day and frustrated by something and you didn't want to tweet it with your name attached to it, something really angry, that you could just click on one of these things, get it out there and feel a little better and move on. Would you like that?
The thing with the whole online, it's just that everybody being online, everybody's opinion matters just as much as everybody else's opinion, and it requires increasing levels of cruelty just to keep up. Go to any video on YouTube, check out the fourth commenter's comment. He always rips the third commenter, because the fourth commenter is always a jerk, and the fifth guy, the newcomer, tries to find common ground among everyone, and for that
guy never wins.
For that, the sixth commenter impugns his sexuality. So, they also say that the problem with anonymity online is that it could creates bullies, right? You could bully. But let's remember, who's the biggest victims of bullying? It's the bullies, right? They're ostracized, they're stigmatized, and they're treated like monsters in society. And to all the bullies out there, I just want to say, it gets better.
Do we need anonymity now more than ever because of all the NSA stuff? Look, I don't even believe that any of these apps truly work, because I'm pretty sure that if the government wants to get in there and figure out that they can somehow track it to your IP address on your computer or something related to your phone. But let's pretend for a second that these things truly are anonymous. Is there any at that point, then it has some worth, right? Because we need to be able to share secrets, and with everything going on with the NSA and all that.
But why do we need to share secrets online? This is what's so strange to me. Like, if you're thinking about putting your information out there online, you need to assume that at some point somebody's going to figure out exactly who it is. If you want to maintain anonymity, if you want to keep your ideas anonymous, why put them out there online and just under some shield?
What about somebody, for example, that's working for the NSA now? Let's say that there's things that Snowden hasn't revealed that they know are even worse. Something like this would be a legitimate way of getting it out there.
Well,
right?
but you think that with our technologies,
that's my point. Exactly, I don't believe that it would work.
You'd be able to follow the trail in the IP address. You're right, and figure out exactly who that was. Like, maybe I wouldn't be able to figure it out just sitting on my computer reading this anonymous quote. But if somebody wants to figure out who made this post, I mean, Google keeps everything that you ever search for. I mean, if you really wanted information, it would be possible to get that kind of information. And again, that's the risk that we run in living in this world where everything is accessible. It's the weird price that we pay for the convenience that we strangely want, and for the my opinion matters feeling that we all seem to strangely want. I'm not saying that we all do, but that as a society people seem to want.
Public people talking about our feelings all the time. Not us. No, we're fine. I mean, do you think that there's some worth to, in a day and age of the NSA and spying and all that, do you think if they couldn't track this stuff, that there's some worth to it?
I think I mean, many times I wished I was anonymous online to be able to say certain things. So, instead of having to re-sign into Google under a fake name and then go to the commenter on YouTube and rip him a new asshole.
Yeah. Can you just write your fake name here so I can just
My
make
fake-
sure
my-
what you've been writing about me on
My
these
fake
comments?
name is Jim Dore.
Jim
so,
Dore.
Yeah, so people
Wow.
don't know.
You really
Yeah.
reached for that one. It was-
You
That
know.
is funny. Every time I have you on the show, there's this guy Jim Dore who's like, that Jimmy Dore
See?
is just
He goes nuts for it.
fantastic. And on that note, I want to thank my non-anonymous guests, Beth Troutman, Jimmy Dore. Their Twitters are right down below. Subscribe, like, all that good stuff. We're not tracking you. The government is, but don't worry about that. And we will do it again next week. Thanks, guys.